Shona, let's move on to International Women's Day, which fell yesterday, but lots of coverage of that in the Sunday papers.
Yes, and two very contrasting stories talking about the controversial gender laws, as Mail on Sunday puts it. So they've led with Sturgeon jeered at an SNP Women's Day event. They've got some pictures of the jeering and of Sturgeon walking past it. And the problem with a lot of the reporting of this is that political reporters love drama. They love to see people under pressure over things, but are not necessarily that interested in the nuts and bolts and the details of policy. So yes, the Mail on Sunday would want to say, oh, Nicola Sturgeon jeered on Women's Day, but the Times have a much smaller story, which is Swinney to meet feminist activists. And this is also a meeting's been brokered at the SNP's International Women's Day event, where John Swinney met campaigners For Women Scotland, who have been at the forefront of campaigning against the self-ID law that, as we know, ended up being blocked. But also there are much further reaching implications of some of the informal self-ID policies. The recent or ongoing employment tribunal involving the nurse Sandy Peggy, bringing this topic to the fore again, not that it's gone away. So we have, on one hand, Nicola Sturgeon being jeered and blamed as the architect of all this. Of course, it was cross-party supported. But on the other, this more positive John Swinney wanting to meet people, wanting to move forward positively, given that we have For Women Scotland versus the Scottish ministers, the Supreme Court's ruling on that being expected. So, John Swinney obviously can't ignore that. And it's definitely a change of tone. The Sunday Post have got a lawyer warning police will end up in legal battle like NHS over trans changing room policy. Again, this employment tribunal, the NHS Fife one, is not going to conclude until July. So I don't think we'll have headlines every week until then, but clearly people are already looking ahead to say whatever happens with this, a lot of organisations are perhaps going to have to look at their policies and see if they are compliant with the law. And then that kind of gives John Swinney a pretty firm basis for saying we might need to pull back on some of the things that have happened under the old era. Of course, he was very much part of the old era as well, but he's not been very involved in this. And he's obviously trying to set a different tone in terms of his interactions with campaigners.
Adam, what do you think about the way that the papers are following this discussion? Are they reflecting, for example, public opinion on this? As well as the variety of different groups who have a stake in it? Yeah,
I think they probably are. And it is one of these issues that's sort of creeping more and more into the public eye, as reflected by being in the front of so many newspapers. The Mail on Sunday talks about how Nicola Sturgeon was jeered as she arrived at an event to mark it, ironically, International Women's Day. Another group of women jeered her as she arrived. And they talk about her a betrayal. And I think that's what's at the root of this in relation to Nicola Sturgeon, is that, for so long she was, Britain's most impressive politician probably. And she was a woman. She was a real icon. But then she also got the ball rolling on all the gender reform stuff. And that's where a lot of, I guess, of the feminist groups, it really hurts them, because it's the betrayal aspect. You were one of us, and now we're putting up with all sorts of things because of the policies you put into motion. And again, that comes through in the Sunday Post story as well. We've got this NHS Fife employment tribunal of the nurse in the changing room, and now the same lawyers warning that it won't just be the NHS that have this problem. All public sector organisations, especially in this case the police, are going to run into trouble with this law about what trans women, trans men do, what changing facilities they use, no clear guidance, people not knowing how to interpret it. The Sunday Post says that the female police officers who don't want to share a changing room with men, understandably, are too scared to raise it because they do not want to find themselves in an employment tribunal. They don't want to tie themselves in a knot. They just want to go on with the job. So I feel like when this the verdict comes out in the Sandy Peggy case, it could be quite transformational.
Yeah, James, what are your thoughts on that, on how much might change? You should also say that the Sunday Post story says a police survey showed that under 1% of staff identify as trans.
That's true, yeah. And the Sunday Post has, obviously, it covers the story on its front page. It also has a reference on its front page to something that's on page 16, which is aptly labelled Gender Wars, which is its coverage of this clash. And I would say that the headline is totally overstated on this. It was a clash between protesters in Aberdeen, whereby because of a police cordon being kind of pulled back, they ended up relatively close face to face. And they've got a photo, and it's about 3 people on one side and 5 people on the other in this photograph. So I think war is possibly a bit of hyperbole on this front, but it's no doubt that these stories are to be linked in the reader's mind, and they're trying to show this narrative across the board of tensions that exist there and that haven't gone away in politics. But I think Shauna's right about John Swinney's probably trying to walk this line and take it as a new opportunity, because he's looked at what's come before him and how much it dominated previous leadership in the SNP. And I cannot imagine for one second that somebody who's been in politics as long as John Swinney has, that he thinks this is something that needs more oxygen. In fact, I can imagine being quite frustrated at how much time it takes up as a discussion. But it is important, and it's an issue that needs to be set aside. But I will say on behalf of the rest of the politics in the UK, there's a lot of people in Westminster watching Scotland. There's a lot of eyes on Scotland for this case, and I think it will be, regardless of your opinions on it, transformative.